Welcome to the Sisterhood Tea Party, where we get together weekly to discuss all the tea about life, relationships, pop culture, and generally anything you'd chat about with your best friend over a cup of tea or beverage of choice.
We're your hosts, Stephanie and Jessica, and we've been spilling the tea to each other for more than a decade, and now we're ready to invite the rest of you to the tea party.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Sisterhood Tea Party. I'm Jessica.
And I'm Stephanie. Today we have such a treat for y'all. Joining us is a very, very special guest, Morgan Roberts. Morgan is the creator of the podcast Female Gaze, the Film Club, where she dives deep into films directed by female filmmakers. She breaks down their unique perspectives, explores their stories, and shares why their voices matter in cinema.
Morgan, it has been more than 10 years since we've all three been together. How are you? What have you been up to since college?
Yeah, I will say that number hurts a little bit when you say it aloud, but I've been great. Yeah, I went to grad school. I have been working. I have gray hair to prove it now. Yeah, and I've been outside of my normal day job doing lots of movie stuff. I write for some sites and then started this podcast because I just like talking about movies and women in film.
I love that so much.
Yeah, I love it. I'm excited. But yeah, we're excited to have you here and learn from your expertise. So we're just going to get right to it.
Yes. So before we get into it, we asked some of our friends on social media some fun questions to kind of get their thoughts on female filmmakers. And so one of the questions was, what's your favorite movie directed by a woman? And we got some pretty interesting responses.
We did. Some of the top picks were Barbie and Clueless, and a few people even mentioned A Wrinkle in Time.
Yes, and we also asked if anybody has ever intentionally chosen to watch a movie because it was directed by a woman. And a lot of people said either that it wasn't something that they thought about, and some also said that they haven't done that, but they would like to start, which I thought was pretty interesting. So, Morgan, what do you think about that? Does this surprise you?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. I think people see films as entertainment, and I love that. But I also think that film is an art form, and even more magically, it is many art forms coming together at the exact same time, trying to work in tandem. And so I think it's difficult sometimes to try to understand that people's lived experience ends up influencing their art. So not surprised, but do I love that Barbie and Clueless are the top two that came to mind? Absolutely. A Wrinkle in Time is actually the only part that has surprised me because I don't think that was loved by critics. I think it's a great film. So I'm happy to see that there were a few people still doing the good work and, highlighting that film.
Yeah, I actually haven't seen that one.
I was about to say I haven't seen that one either.
It's based off of the book. It's directed by Ava DuVernay, who also did Selma and the documentary film 13. And I really love it because there's a lot of diversity in the film without it feeling like, oh, we're just serving some idea of what diversity should be. And it is really just a lovely tribute to that book and to people who have all enjoyed it. So I highly recommend. It also has Oprah. Iconic.
I love that. I have seen Selma by that same director, which was powerful. I will say in our poll, though, we did include Booksmart, and I was so sad that nobody selected Booksmart as like their favorite because I love that one. I mean, Barbie and Clueless are definitely top, but I love Booksmart.
Booksmart's a good one.
Well, thanks to everyone who joined in on the poll. We loved hearing your thoughts. And if you want to be a part of future polls and get featured in our episodes, make sure to follow us on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. We'd love to hear from you. So now let's dive into why female directors matter.
Yes. So Morgan, your podcast is all about films directed by women. Why do you think it's important for people to pay attention to female directors?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of underrepresented filmmakers. As a woman, I just kind of have always gravitated towards female filmmakers. So I actually did some research for this. So USC Annenberg, the School of Communication and Journalism, has been doing a study since 2007 on really just diversity in film, but they're kind of only one of the few leading places that's looking at women in film. And over 17 years, out of the top 100 grossing films, so that's 1,700 films, 97 women have been directors of top grossing films over 17 years.
Wow.
25 of those directors were women of color. And so that was 123 films were directed by women across those 17 years. So that's why it feels really important to talk about women in film, because there are clearly so many women making film, but only so few of them getting the opportunity to have their films actually embraced by larger audiences. So, like, if you go to a film festival, Sundance is happening right now as we're recording this. There are so many films by female and non-binary filmmakers that are probably going to get picked up by small independent distribution companies, and that's so wonderful. But those small independent distribution companies are going to only be able to show in New York and LA and maybe Chicago. They might get a streaming deal that's going to be buried on one of the streaming sites. Very infrequently are we seeing a lot of those films coming to wider audiences. So, like, while we have the ability to actually go and seek out these movies, we can rent them on video on demand. We can do what the dinosaurs did and get physical media, which everyone should be doing. We have all these opportunities, but it's really hard to understand what's available when the movies that you're seeing, the movies that are being pushed to you, are largely directed by men and largely directed by white men.
Wow. I knew there was a discrepancy, but I did not know it was that large.
Yeah. And only 2% of films are shot by female cinematographers of all major studio films. In the history of the Academy Awards, only 3 women have ever been nominated in that category. And in Best Director, there have been 9 women nominated for a total of 10 nominations. Jane Campion is the only woman who's ever been nominated twice. And there are plenty of men who have also received multiple nominations in that same category.
Wow. That honestly blows my mind. Like, you don't really realize it until you look at the numbers. You're like, I'm sorry, what? Why is it this way? You know?
Yeah. And again, I think a lot of it has always been the way in which we attribute what we think is a quote unquote good movie. So much of that is driven by box office numbers. And if you look way back to when Wonder Woman came out, everyone was like, is Patty Jenkins ever going to be able to direct a movie again if this does not make a bajillion dollars? And luckily, it's a superhero movie. So, of course, people went out to go and see that. That seems to be something that a lot of audiences seek out to actually see in a movie theater. But it was a really big gamble for them to make a movie like Barbie. And this is Greta Gerwig, backed by Margot Robbie and her production company. They got Warner Brothers behind it, and it was a huge gamble. And obviously, it paid off. The other film that was released on that same day made half as much as what Barbie made on almost over twice the budget of what Barbie had. So I think it is just about the way in which we value women. And I don't think that film is the only place where we see women who aren't valued.
So for someone who might think, well, a good movie is a good movie no matter who directs it, how would you respond? Like, what unique perspectives do female directors bring to the table?
Yeah, I think I would respond that I understand when something is entertaining, but I wonder if you can open yourself up to what an artist is trying to tell you. I think that's really kind of what it always boils down to. I have been taking this Denzel Washington quote for like the past year. So when he was promoting Fences, people kept asking why he was the one who needed to direct this. And he kind of talked about how Steven Spielberg largely makes films about the Jewish experience as a Jewish man, and Martin Scorsese largely makes movies about Italian Americans as an Italian American man. And so he likes to reframe it as it's not color, it's culture. And so the way our lived experience informs the way in which we move through the world also informs the way in which we work as artists. So has Steven Spielberg done a film about slavery? Unfortunately, yes. Should he have been the person to do the film about slavery? Absolutely not. So it is about making sure that people who have a deeper understanding of history and context can actually be making those films. And I think the other thing that's really important too is the way in which we view others. So while it's really nice to feel reflected as a woman and like see myself in a Greta Gerwig film or a Sarah Polley film, I think it's really interesting to see the way in which we view other people, specifically men. Um, I highly recommend watching a lot of movies directed by women that have central male characters because I think it's really interesting the grace and context and just the layers that women give men that men sometimes don't even give themselves.
Wait, do you have some recommendations there? That is such an interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean, I highly recommend anything done by Lynn Shelton. She loves having really complicated men. The Elaine May film, Mikey and Nikki, is a great movie, basically about two men having a friendship breakup. And a movie that I talked about very recently that I don't think people know is actually directed by a woman. It's Wayne's World, directed by Penelope Spheris. That movie, directed by a woman.
Fascinating.
I would have never known that.
Also, we talk about friendship breakups a lot on this show, so I'm definitely going to check that movie out because that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's a great time.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by that one. What are some movies that people might recognize today that were directed by women? I know you mentioned some, but what other ones do you have out there?
Yeah, so in addition to Wayne's World, I think Penny Marshall is a great director because she directed both Big and A League of Their Own, which I think are big ones from people's youths.
Yeah.
You see,
Yeah, you
so
never
many.
know.
Right.
Some of my personal favorites from my youth were The Babysitter's Club, directed by Melanie Mayron, Harriet the Spy, which I did cover on my podcast and blew my own mind that that movie was directed by a woman. I watched Tu Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, at an inappropriately young age. That's directed by a woman. But I also think there are some other ones, like The Matrix, directed by two trans women.
I did not know
What?
that.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
That is fascinating. I would have never known.
I think that's really important, and their filmography is super important because they came out, I think, after the Matrix movies. If I'm incorrect, I'm okay being incorrect. You can correct me. But yeah, their filmography is like super important to understanding their experience. Another one that film bros love and misread is American Psycho. That was directed by Mary Harron, and it's actually co-written by her and Genevieve Turner. So women all involved in a film that men like to claim. And then
Men are going to go wild to find
they're
that
gonna
out.
Yeah, I haven't even seen that because honestly, it is like it's felt a little turn-offish for me because of the vibes in society about it. But now I like want to go see it and look at the nuance in it.
Yeah, I highly recommend. I also covered that on my podcast, and luckily, another woman wanted to cover that with me, and I was really grateful because I'm like, it is so much about the female experience, even though there's a lot of men in it. Yeah, so American Psycho. Obviously, I think like Greta Gerwig is my number one picked director that people love. She did Lady Bird, Little Women, and Barbie. And then Sofia Coppola is probably the best known female filmmaker. She did movies like The Virgin Suicides, Priscilla a couple years ago, The Beguiled. She has a great filmography. And when we talk about women in film and how we talk about the fact that it's really difficult for women to make movies, her last name is Coppola in the film industry, and she even has to fight for financing. So if it's tough for her, it's tough for many other women.
Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. Do you feel like you talked a little bit about filmography already, but like, do you feel like there are stylistic or thematic elements that stand out in these films compared to those directed by men? Like, you also talked a little bit about the nuance of how men are even categorized there, but like, what are some other aspects of that that you notice that is just like a different point of view?
I think some of the things of like when we talk about like the female experience, there are, for instance, I think like motherhood is handled very differently when it's a film directed by a woman than when it's directed by a man. If you've ever seen the movie Waitress or seen the musical, which is based off of the movie Waitress, it's women who actually directed both the movie and the musical. Um, so I mean, like, I think that that adds a lot of texture to like what it means to consider motherhood, to be experiencing interpartner violence, which is a huge theme of that film too. You have a movie like Maggie's Plan, directed by Rebecca Miller, who also talks a lot about like motherhood. And yeah, so I think interpersonal relationships are always really interesting. A filmmaker that I personally love right now, Nia DaCosta, has made three whole movies with a range of themes, but they always boil down to like interpersonal relationships. And she's done everything from independent film, Little Woods, horror film, Candyman, and big budget, The Marvels.
Oh, wow.
So she can do any and everything, and I'm here for it.
I love that. I will say, because you mentioned Little Woman, I watched that movie for the first time this past year. And what's wild about it is I got sucked in because I fell in love with Timothy Chalamet this year, and there were a bunch of edits about it that really like presented it as more of a romance movie, and I fell in love with that movie because the interpersonal relationships between the siblings and even the mom and the friendships, it was like so beautiful. So I love that you called that one out because I did forget about that one until just now.
It's, yeah. There's also a 1994 version, also directed by a woman. It's very different, and I love that they get to be different. But the 2019 version, I watch that every year for Christmas.
Love it.
That's amazing. Um, Now, for our listeners who are total beginners at understanding films by female directors, me included, where would you suggest that they start if they wanted to explore more films?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on what types of films you're interested in. If you are kind of going for subversive comedy, Elaine May is a great place to start. Her film, The Heartbreak Kid, is one of my favorites. It's basically an anti rom com, which is fun. It's also from the 70s, which I think a lot of people forget that women were also making movies at that time. If you like coming of age films, at Booksmart is a great place to start. But you also have Ida Lupino, who made a movie in 1966 called The Trouble with Angels. It's a great coming of age film. And it has Haley Mills, who got famous in The Parent Trap, which, if you're familiar with the Lindsay Lohan The Parent Trap, that was also directed by a woman, Nancy Myers. Show Up, we love. But yeah, I think if we're kind of looking for easy accessibility, I think Greta Gerwig is always a great place to start. Nia DaCosta has a wide range of films. So if you're open to horror, if you're open to kind of a neo Western, excellent. If you're okay with kind of like doing slower movies that really are cinematic in their approach, Kelly Reichardt is another filmmaker that I absolutely adore. She's done movies like Certain Women, Wendy and Lucy very recently did a film called Showing Up. Again, they're largely about people. And yeah, I think that her work tends to be minimized and calling it quiet, but I think intimate is the word that I would use for it, even though she uses the surroundings to like really build out these worlds for people. A duo that I love, if you are familiar with the film Little Miss Sunshine, that was actually co directed by Valerie Faris and her directing partner, Jonathan Dayton. And they have other great films that I think people tend to forget about because Little Miss Sunshine was kind of such an indie darling that People aren't looking for Ruby Sparks or Battle of the Sexes. So those are some places that I would maybe start. And then I think a great thing to do as well, Letterboxd is an app that if you like to log movies or find new movies, they have a list that have 100 films directed by women that range from Jean Dielman, which is a 3.5 hour, almost silent 1970s film directed by a Belgian filmmaker. I love it. Maybe not the first one to go um, to some kind of more accessible films like your Book Smarts or your Women Talking or She Said.
I'm just have to say how impressed I am with you, like rattling off so many names. Like you are truly an expert in this area, and I love that.
We got to support the ladies.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Other than like watching their films, what are other things that people can do to support female directors?
Yeah, I think actually going to the movie theater and buying a ticket to see their film is a really important step. Because as I mentioned before, box office numbers, it's kind of antiquated, but at this point in time, that is still how studios determine, should I make more of these movies or should I not? So my favorite thing to do is if I see an independent film that I love, I go and see it at least twice. Or if you are a movie like Bottoms, I'll go and see that like 3 or 4 times because Female Fight Club in high school doesn't get better than that. Another thing that you can do is so many areas actually have film groups that sometimes will hold festivals. Your local colleges may also have film festivals. So showing up for those types of things. While again, this is more focused on female filmmakers, there are also filmmakers who aren't American. It's really important that you actually see those films too, especially non-European films. We like to say people love foreign films, but they've never seen a film from South America. I'm currently working on that blind spot myself. So those are great places to go. The other thing to do is like follow them on social media, see what they're working on, get excited about those things, and share them with people. I can't tell you how many times I've talked about a movie, probably to like an annoying level if you ask the people who are in my orbit. But I got so many people to see films that I don't think that they would have ever gone looking for. And they've ended up enjoying that. And that's really magical when that happens too.
That's amazing. I love it. We're going to switch gears a little bit. So I want to know, we kind of talked about this offline, but what inspired you to start your podcast? Like, was there a particular film or director that kind of lit that spark for you?
Yeah, so I've always actually worked when I've done film criticism. I've primarily written for sites that are female focused. So it's kind of been like a natural place that I've existed. For instance, I had the amazing opportunity to go to the Sundance Film Festival a few times, especially when they had more virtual access. And I prioritized films directed by women and non binary filmmakers. And I ended up falling in love with so many different movies. I am so sorry with how often I have talked about the film. Sometimes I think about dying, but I love that movie so much. And it was kind of after I was able to switch in my personal life, what I was doing for work, that I started to have free time. And I have always loved talking about films directed by women. And I have so many great friends who support that. And that's kind of how it started. And yeah, we're like coming in on almost 50 episodes now of the podcast. And yeah, the other thing that I love about it is my guests get to pick the film that we talk about. So they pick the film, we both watch it, we sit down and discuss it. And that's been a really fun journey because I have started to chip away at my own watch list. And that's a really fun thing to be able to do.
That is amazing. Congrats on 50. That like I just feel like everything you've built here, it's so inspiring. All these things you've accomplished. Like I can literally remember back when we were in college, because we all were in college together. That's how we all met. Like, you were such a big movie buff. I even remember back then, like, we talked about it earlier that when we filmed our last episode, that my husband and I, we do movie brackets. And like my husband keeps a spreadsheet also of like all the movies and TV shows. And I'm like, yes. I told him about you like years ago and your spreadsheet. So I'm curious, do you still have a spreadsheet of all of the movies that you watch? And if so, like what's your stats today?
Oh, goodness. I don't know what my stats are today. We're like well past 2000 because I hit 2000 in college. That's unwell that you remembered that. And I'm a little, I will say the thing is, so I have a Letterboxd. I did join it to give a movie a 5-star review because I hated it so much that I had to tell people how much I hate this movie. And my friend, who also kind of bullied me into starting the podcast, was like, you should join Letterboxd. And like almost like Regina George was like, put it in the burn book, honey. So that's how I got a Letterboxd.
Wait, dare I ask what the movie was? Like, I feel like you have to share.
Oh, yeah. It is Aaron Sorkin's Being the Ricardos. I love Nicole Kidman so much, and I hated this movie more than anything I had watched that year. And, oh boy, it was bad. So we're actually nearing 3,000 movies, by the way. I'm at about 2,940 films.
Wow, that is amazing.
Wow. I'm so blown away by that. But this is bringing back all the good times. Like, I'm just thinking about just our whole entire college experience. We had such a great time.
Really
and I'm so happy that we really did. But I'm really happy that we've been able to catch up today. So before we wrap up, I thought it would be fun to play our little game that we like to call What's the Ick? And I always say it like that because it's a vibe. But today's episode obviously is all about movies. We're going to keep it within the film theme. So here's how it's going to work. We're going to name our movie-related icks, something that really kind of bugs us. So I'm going to let Jessica kick us off for this one.
I'm so passionate about this, you guys. Okay, my movie ick is that every film has a bathroom scene. And I promise you, you're going to notice it now because I have a bathroom phobia, for those of you who don't know. And I hate anything to do with bathroom. And for some reason, these bathroom scenes are always someone sitting on the floor, sitting in their tub, touching the walls, touching the sink. And as someone with a bathroom phobia, I'm like, when I'm in a bathroom, I'm not touching anything at all. I don't even keep my toothbrush in the bathroom. I keep it in my bedroom because like, I'm not doing it. And I swear every movie has it. And every time I have to just like look away and I just listen and I can't watch that part of the movie because of my phobia. So that is my movie ick.
Jess, I did not know that.
It's very niche, I know.
And a dozen film recommendations just went out the window with that.
Oh no.
You're like, never mind.
And oh, not that one.
Can't do it.
Oh my gosh.
Can't
okay, I'll go. No. I'll go next. So for me, it is a runtime that's over 2.5 hours. I can't do it. I just feel like maybe back in the day with like intermissions and things, like at the very start of movies, that it kind of made sense. But like, I really feel like you can get the point across in 1 hour and 45 minutes. Like, I really don't think we need to run this out longer than 2 hours even. At that point, I just feel like we've lost the plot. So over 2 hours, over 2.5 hours, it's really not for me.
I know that I referenced a 3.5 hour largely silent film.
You did. And
I absolutely agree with that. You have to be able to use that time wisely, and people do not. It's about pacing and actually letting your editor edit, and people are not into that. So I absolutely agree with that.
Okay, that makes me feel so much better coming from you. So I feel validated 100%.
Yeah, I feel like this is why I never have watched The Lord of the Rings, because anytime I ask, like, what's the order, they're like, well, you could watch some director's cut, super long version or something like that. And I'm like, I'm good.
I mean, the director's cuts are good. But if you want to be a casual watcher, don't. That's fine.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Morgan, we have to hear your movie ick now.
Okay, so I actually have two. One is theater related. My first ick is being on your phone. Get off your phone.
Oof.
You just have to be silent for 2.5 hours. Nicole Kidman is telling you about how magical movies are in a place like this, and you're like, excellent. Let me text every human that I know. And I'm specifically also calling out boomers because not only are they on
Mm.
their phones, that phone is so bright. It's like the sun in the middle of a movie
With the
theater.
enlarged text too, like you can read their
Enlarged text.
conversation.
It feels like a spotlight has been turned on. I do not understand why anyone is checking their phone. And I would also like to say, I went to go see a film and politely told someone, please put your phone away. I could have been meaner. I wanted to be meaner. And the person looked at me like I called them the worst word in the world. And I'm like, I will fight right now in the middle of Nosferatu. And luckily, an old man was like, put your phone away or I will. And I was like, "Ugh, I guess that's the energy I need to bring next time. So please put your phones away."
That is so valid.
That's my first
That's
ick.
valid. Absolutely not. Would not. I would fight someone as well.
It's 2 hours. That's all. I don't get it. Okay. So, second ick. I do not like when people do not use intimacy coordinators. We would not have an action movie without a stunt coordinator. I think that we would think that that's pretty reckless. So, why are we having intimacy scenes without someone who can keep people safe? And not only that, but make sure that the edit is dignified and does exactly what those scenes are supposed to be doing. So, let's maybe start integrating that into our work environment.
This is a really big discussion on the internet right now, so I'm glad you brought this up. If I can ask a spicy and currently uneducated question, have you been following the drama with It Ends With Us? Because my understanding is there are some elements of intimacy coordinator in that discussion, and I'm curious your take, if you have a take on that situation.
Yeah, so I don't know. So with the information that we have, right, I think some of the things that are being discussed are that there are allegations of sexual harassment on set, and that there was some other behavior that was concerning to Blake Lively, and asked for an intimacy coordinator to be on set for those scenes that they were doing. And so right now, I do believe that she's filed, I think in the state of California, you have to file first with like the Department of Labor before you can file any type of civil suit. So that's kind of where that is. And yeah, I think that this is potentially going to be an example of the fact that like intimacy coordinators are really helpful to have on set, because it's almost like working at a place without an HR. Red flag, right? Like I know that HR is there for the company, but also there are some protections for you as an employee that you need to go to HR for. So yeah, I think that regardless of what ends up coming out of this situation, it is sparking a conversation about how is there still workplace harassment when this industry has been under such a microscope and shown to have such an insidiousness when it comes to her harassment on set in, functions that are, if you're going to the Golden Globes, that's still a professional function, even if they are applying you with ungodly amounts of alcohol. Yeah, it's really raising a question of, if we have these tools available to us, what is making people apprehensive to use that? And should you be working with people who are apprehensive to use that resource? Yeah, like I've talked with a filmmaker who even used an intimacy coordinator when she edited her film because it felt really important. There is an element of sexual violence in the film that she didn't want it to be gratuitous, and she wanted to make sure that it was still honored for its truth without sitting there and potentially triggering someone or misconstruing what's happening. So I think that there's a lot of great uses for intimacy coordinators to keep people safe. But I think it also is great, like with the film Baby Girl, the director has talked about how it really helped her be creative in what she found to be sensual in a film. So safety, big thing, but also good art, another thing.
Absolutely. Well, that was a great ick. Both of your icks were great. So
Yeah.
thank you for indulging us and
Thanks.
playing our game.
Yeah, anytime.
Yeah, this has been such a great conversation. So, again, Morgan, thank you so much for opening our eyes to this incredible world of female filmmakers.
Yes, we're so excited to dive into more films and help our audience do the same. I'm literally like going to go re-listen to this episode and write all the notes from everything that you cited. So where can our listeners find your podcast and where can they follow you online?
Yeah, so you can find the podcast basically on any platform that you listen to podcasts on. The podcast has an Instagram, Female Gaze Film Club, as well as Blue Sky, again, Female Gaze Film Club, with all the new fun Blue Sky app stuff at the end of the handle. I also have a website now, Female Gaze Film Club. It's just femalegazefilmclub.com, where I'm post the podcast as well as reviews and just kind of articles coming from the female perspective, as well as trying to open it up because there are really great non-binary filmmakers who should have a platform as well. And then best place to follow me would be on Letterboxd, MSML Roberts. Sometimes my reviews are serious. Sometimes it is a 5-star review of Madam Web saying that I support women's rights and their wrongs. So check that out.
I love it. Thank you. But before we go, we like to end every episode with our last drop of tea. So, Morgan, as our guest, would you like to share one final thought or piece of advice related to today's topic? So, really, it's just something that our listeners can carry with them moving forward from this episode.
Yeah, I think the big thing that, if I have a last word in all of this, physical media, buy things on DVD, save them in your house. It's really important to do that because sometimes there are films that become inaccessible on streaming and you think that they're going to be there for forever and they're not, but physical media is forever. So please actually go and buy films directed by female filmmakers.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Morgan, and thank you, friends, for tuning in. Make sure to check out Female Gaze the Film Club and give Morgan a follow. We will see you next week.
Bye, friends.